So welcome to Success in General Chemistry. Today I'm going over tips that were designed by Dr. Joe March, the coordinator of General Chemistry, which would include Chemistry 100, 115, and 117. So 105 is very similar to the content of 100, and it's easier than the content of 115, so I think we have everybody covered. So let's go ahead and get started. As I said, I'll be able to email you guys that are here in the room. I can email you this presentation later. So feel free to either take notes or not. Let's talk about confidence. Confidence has to do with whether you think you can do well in the class. So how do you get that? How do you become confident in chemistry? It comes from practice in solving problems and realizing that hopefully as you study, you can get to the point where you can solve the problem without looking back at the book, without looking back at your notes, and without having to consult with anyone. But while you're getting to that stage, you use all those things. Being able to solve problems is how you gain confidence. No one learns to play a musical instrument just by reading a book about the instrument, okay, or by attending a lecture, or even attending a concert. You learn to play a musical instrument by what? Playing it, by hours and hours and hours of practice. And that's how you learn chemistry. There are a few people, and maybe you guys may not be among them, and that may be why you're here. There may be a few people who can pick up chemistry just by watching, but that's almost unheard of. Okay? If you're that gifted of a person, congratulations. Most people are not. So chemistry involves a lot of practice and a lot of hard work. I want to say that up front. I don't have any easy way to tell you this is how you can pick up chemistry easily by walking into a class and watching a lecture. I want you to know up front, I can't tell you that. So what I'm talking about today is how to do the practice and how to do the hard work to be good at chemistry. I don't know of any other way to do it. And when I read through Dr. March's handouts, it was very clear to me that he would agree with that. There may be an exception. I'll never say you can't do it any other way, but I don't know of any other way. Practice, 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 and hard work. And you need to know that up front. When we talk about solving problems, I don't mean that you'll get to the test and the problem you have on the test will be exactly like the homework. Okay? In college, tests are a lot harder than high school, and many freshmen, many people who are new to chemistry find that to be one of the most difficult things about it. Not only chemistry, but other subjects too. It's just a lot harder in college. So in high school, you might have been asked questions like, what is an atom, what's a proton? You have simple definitions, simple multiple choice, and maybe they gave you all the formulas. It might have been very easy. If you had teachers that were really hard that you hated, you're probably going to be happy with you, okay? Because you'll be seeing some problems on the test, and Dr. Johnson can address this later. You're going to see problems on the test that are different from your homework, but they use the same concepts. But they may be asking you to apply the concept to a new problem you haven't seen before. So the way you get ready for that is what I already mentioned, practicing. If you don't know how to use that formula very well and you don't know really, you're not real clear on what the mole is or whatever the concepts were, then you probably won't be able to apply it to a new problem. But if you know your concepts, you know the formulas, you know how to work them, you've worked enough problems where you can do it quickly, then you have time to stop and think on the test. Okay, this isn't a familiar question, but let me think over what I know and see what fits. If you don't know your material frontward and backward when you walk into the exam, then you don't have time to think through it very well. So practice and preparation are key. If you're not comprehending in the class, or if you just had a quiz or a test that was not the grade that you wanted, then it's time to change things. How am I going to do better? And I put up here avoiding insanity. Okay? A lot of people make a bad grade, or they realize they're not understanding in class, but they don't make a big change. What do we call it If you don't like the way something's going, but yet you keep doing it the way you did it before, you keep doing the same thing, you're hoping for a better grade, but you're still doing the same thing that you did to get the low grade. We call that insanity. Okay? That's, you don't change anything, but you just magically think a better grade is going to happen. You know, I'll just study more. Well, if you study more, but you don't study any differently, then you might not get a different result. So you have to really make changes. A lot of people try to study the way they did in high school, and they find out that it doesn't work. Some things are easy to change. When are you studying? Is it when you're tired or you're distracted? Maybe there's another time of the day that might be better for you. Maybe you're trying to study at night and you're finding that you're really sleepy. Maybe you need to do your studying in the morning, or vice versa. Maybe you're trying to study 3 hours at a time and study a whole chapter. Maybe you need to take that chapter and break it up and study certain concepts. Don't feel bad if you're trying to study and you didn't get through the whole chapter. Take concepts and study them one at a time, okay? It doesn't matter if you get the whole chapter done at one time or not. Break it up. If you're trying to study for a solid hour and you can't focus that long, study for half an hour. Take a break and do something for 10 or 15 minutes and then come back to it. That takes more time, but you get more done if that's what you need to do. One person told me the other day that she can only focus for 10 or 15 minutes at a time. Well, that's not good. She's got to work on that and get better. But if that's what it is right now, then focus for 10 or 15 minutes, take a break for 5, and focus for 10 more minutes. Of course, gradually you need to build it up. But trying to have a 3 or 4 hour marathon study session probably isn't effective for most people. And it's certainly not good to try to get all your chemistry studying done in one day. That gives you several days to forget it before you come back to it. When you're learning something new, it's much better for most people to study it every day, maybe take one break, maybe 6 days a week for an hour or 2 a day, if that's what it takes, rather than trying to get it all done on Monday or all done on the weekend. Seeing it every day like you did in high school when you had the class every day, it was easier to remember. It's much better to work on chemistry every day or almost every day rather than trying to say, okay, I'll do chemistry on Monday and Friday from 4 to 8. That might not work. So think about how you can change the time. Where are you studying? Is it an environment that's truly conducive to studying? If there are a lot of distractions, TV, internet, roommates, if you're a commuter and you're going home to your studying, a lot of commuter students tell me they can't study at home. It's too distracting. They've got chores to do, they have parents, they have family, they have the computer, they have the television. That might not be the best place to study. How many of you commute back and forth to school? Okay, for those of you that do that, it might make sense for you to think of this as a job and stay here on campus from 8 to 5 every day or something like that. So that you're here, make yourself stay here and do your study, go to the library, go to the chemistry building, maybe you can even come here, I don't know. But think of this as a job, okay, and stay on campus as much as you can and then go home when you're done and just see if that works better for you. It does for some people. But even if you live on campus, there can be some places that are distracting, like the dorm room. You might need to go to the library and study. They have real study rooms in the library that you can use if you're a group. Okay? So think about when and where. Now there are some other things you can change as well that might not be so easy to change. These take effort. What are you studying? Are you just studying the notes? Is that not working? Then you need to change that. Are you just focusing on the text and not the notes? You might need to change that because usually you need both. Okay? In high school, you could have just studied your notes. In college, that's not usually going to work. There's no way the teacher can cover, if you looked at the size of that, there's no way the teacher can cover every concept in the book like they did in high school. So you have to learn some of it on your own. You can't usually just study your notes. Are you using any online tutorials? If not, maybe that would help. Some students love that, some don't. If it disagrees with what the teacher says, the teacher's grading the test, go with what the teacher says. But some people really find help from online tutorials that you can just read. Are you doing the homework problems? Are you finding extra homework problems to do? You know, if the teacher only assigns part of the problems, maybe the teacher doesn't assign all of them, that might be enough for some students, but if it's not working for you, then you need to do more problems, okay? Or, once you get them done, go back to that homework set a few days later, a week or two later, and see if you can still do those problems without looking back over your notes, or review it, then put those aside and see if you can work those problems again. If you can't work those problems a week or two later, or a month later, guess what? You're not going to be able to work them on the exam. So one of the key things about studying is, okay, we've gone through what? 2-3 weeks of school? This is our third week? Okay, if you have not yet gone back and studied over what you learned in week 1 to make sure you still know it, you may have forgotten it by now. Okay? And next week, you still need to go over weeks 1, 2, and 3. The next week, you still need to go over weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4, because if you don't, it won't be in your head if you're an average person. So you have to remember, don't just study what you're learning now. Go back and review what you learned in prior weeks, otherwise you won't be ready when there's a comprehensive exam or a final exam, especially when a lot of chemistry builds on itself as you go along. Do you have a regular study schedule? Are you just studying when you happen to find time, which may not ever happen, or do you have a set time every day or every week to study? It can be very difficult. That's why I said these things are difficult to change. You have classes, you may have work, you may have other life things. Some people are taking care of sick parents. Some students have jobs, some students have children. I have a student in my office this week who has small children at home. Her time management is really serious. Okay, just imagine if you have children in addition to everything else you have in your life. And in chemistry, and in a lot of college courses, cramming doesn't work. Okay, I had somebody tell me that one of her goals is to study for an hour and a half before the test. Okay, the chemistry major has the most experience in swimming just laughed out loud. Now, that's okay for the moment, because the chemistry she's taking right now is a review of what she learned in high school. So she might be okay right now. So I didn't laugh out loud when she said that. But I did make sure she knew that won't work going forward. Okay? A day and a half won't work. A week and a half might not work, especially when she gets chemistry material that's new to you, or it goes more in depth than you've ever seen before. You need to study every week, not just the night before the test. And when people are cramming, they often stay up late hours the night before the test. Not good. Okay, so that's like using the gas in your car, driving your car till it gets almost to empty, and then going to Colorado in your car. We would do that, right? So staying up all night studying, cramming for an exam, not very productive. You actually need more sleep, or enough sleep the night before the exam. Are you working with peers? I highly recommend study groups. Sometimes you might be the one working a lot of the problems and you're teaching the other people. Sometimes the other people in the group are teaching you. But you need to work with people who hold you responsible for learning. Okay? You're supposed to contribute to the group, and so are the other members of the group. And they need to check to see that you really understand. Okay? If you just go through some words and some definitions and some formulas and you all say, yeah, we get that, let's move on. Well, did you really understand it? Okay? So you don't necessarily need to just ask your group members, okay, what is the mole? Did we all agree on the definition of the mole? You need to ask one of your group members, okay, tell us what the mole is. Tell us all about it. And have that group member explain the mole to you as if you were learning it for the first time. In other words, you need to be able to teach your group about that as if you were the teacher. As if you were, if you're in Chemistry 115, as if you were the recitation unit. Okay? Because if you can't do that, if you don't understand it well enough to teach it, then you probably don't understand it well enough to teach it. So test each other with discussion questions, not just little short answers like when you're in high school, because the test is probably not like when you're in high school. Challenge each other. You know, if your group member is not really explaining it well, let them know. You know, if I weren't in this class, I couldn't follow you. Are you sure you understand that? What about this? What about that? You need to be a sort of what we call a devil's advocate. You need to challenge them as if you're a tough teacher. Because if you don't challenge them, then they're probably not going to know it well enough on the exam. If the group works well, your grades will probably improve. But if it's a group that doesn't work well, you know, the students come and you're the only one prepared, they're not even prepared, they haven't even read it, they're contributing to nothing, then that might not be a good group for you. So you need people that will challenge you. Not that will say, oh yeah, you got it, great, when you really don't have it. That won't help you. But I encourage you to try to do study groups. And where do you find them? The people that make the most A's are sitting where? Right here. Okay, she would be the most likely person to make an A in this class, statistically. Not that the rest of you couldn't, but that's just where they usually would be. Up in the front because they want to pay attention, they get there early, and they're usually more engaged and more focused. That would be a good place to look. People who answer questions in class, people who have their materials all neat, and they come to class early, they're sitting out in the hall talking about the material there in the chemistry course. Those are probably the people who are you studying the best way for you? Just reading the book? I'm not saying don't read the book. But if all you do is read the book, that by itself is not going to work well. You have to work the problems. And not just, a lot of people work the problems, and once they work those problems and they've got the right answers, they close the book and they're done. Now that probably was okay in high school. It doesn't work well in chemistry. You have to work the problem, review it, and take notes on it. Okay, unless you're one of these people, there may be a few somewhere out there that can work the problems and make an A, but it's very, very, very few, especially if it's the type of problem you didn't see already in high school. If you're in Chemistry 100 or 105 or even 115, and right now you're doing exactly what you did in high school, it might be okay for now. But when you get to new material, if you just work those problems, check the back of the book, I got the right answers, and move on. You're doing that today, and next week, and next week, and next week. If that's all you're doing, it's probably not going to be in there for the exam. Okay? What concepts were used in the problem? What was the problem about? What were the topics used? What did you have to know to do that problem that you might not remember 2 weeks from now when that chapter is kind of in your distant memory, or a month from now, or on the final exam? It's easy to work the problems when you just study the material. How are you going to work that problem when you see it on a test a month from now and you didn't just study that material? Okay? That's why you need to think about what topics were used that if you didn't just study that chapter, you wouldn't have known. What relationships were required? Okay? So what parts of that problem related to each other? What equations were used, if any? And can you use that equation in all situations, or are there some exceptions? Okay, not all equations work in all situations. If you haven't gotten to equations yet, you'll need that later. Could there be some online tips or online videos that would help you if you get stuck? Okay, might be late at night, maybe it's too late to call the tutor, maybe it's too late, you're not comfortable calling someone else in your class that you've already made friends with. Maybe you could find an online video. Okay, a lot of students like Khan Academy. Can you use that? Khan is Khan Academy. Might not work for all situations, but a lot of students seem to like it. So those are some tips you can consider. So how do you study chemistry? A lot of people make the mistake of only doing the passive learning. Reading the book, listening to other people explain things like the teacher or the SI leader. I certainly hope you're going to SI. It's free help. Watching other people work problems, like in recitation if you're in Chemistry 115. Having the teacher work the problem, seeing the SI leader work the problem. Those are all passive. Okay? And if you stop there, then you're probably not going to do very well, especially, again, when it gets to material you've not already seen before. What you have to do to succeed in chemistry is active learning. This is a lot harder. It takes a lot more effort and energy and time. And that's what you need to do to do well on the test. In high school, you may have done mostly this, and you may have made A's. But this is not high school anymore. So you need active learning. You need to be able to summarize the concepts without looking at the book, without looking at the notes. You need to think critically about your work when you're solving a problem or balancing equations. Why does it work that way? What does it mean? What does the subscript mean? What does the coefficient mean? What does the negative mean? How would I teach someone this? When you're studying, you need to be making a study guide for yourself, but pretend that you're making a study guide for the whole class, like you're the teaching assistant, and the teacher's not going to be there, so you've got to teach that material to that class. Maybe it's a class a year younger than you or whatever. Because if you make the study guide clear enough for someone else to understand, like maybe you have to teach someone who was absent. That would be a good way to think about it. Why do you need to do that? You were there. You weren't absent. Because a week from now, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, when you're preparing for an exam, you're not going to remember everything about that class 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. But if you've got a good, clear study guide, it'll help jog your memory. Because you've already read the book, you were there for lecture, you've reviewed your notes, you've worked all the homework, but you're going to need some tips and guides to help you later when you study for that big exam, which has much more material on it than the high school exams probably do. So when you're active learning, you're thinking about what tips do I need to write down to remind myself a week or 2 or 3 weeks from now, or 3 months from now when I'm preparing for my final exam, of how did I know how to work that problem? That's what I'm talking about. And you don't get that just from reading and watching other people. You have to work the problems and put tips for yourself, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So don't work the problems just to get an answer. Okay? Do work the problems to learn. So it's not just did I get the right answer, how did I get it? How did I know what steps to use? How did I know what formula to use? How many problems should you work? You might be thinking, how many problems do I need to work? Well, obviously, you need to do what the professor assigns. And sometimes the professor might assign certain problems, but recommend that you do some additional problems. If you want to make an A, obviously, you should do what the professor recommends. Of course, you do what you have to do for the points. But if the professor recommends, you also do whatever other pages, whatever other problem numbers, you should do those too. And if that's not enough, you might need to do more than that. So how many problems should you work, or how many times should you work them? You have to answer that by how well you want to learn the concepts and how prepared you want to be for the timed test. So it's very critical that it's timed. If you had all the time in the world, you might could figure it all out, but you don't. You have that exact class period. And if you don't remember how to work the problem, if you're spending your time thinking, what was that formula? And is it okay to use it here? And what does that word mean? And what does this word mean? If you're confused by the question, you're going to spend a lot of time worrying about it. You have to be able to work through it immediately. So how many problems you should work is however many it takes. Okay? How much effort do you need to put into this is answered by what grade you want to make. And some of you have to realize it comes easier to some people than it does others. That's just the way things are. So a lot of it boils down to how badly do you want the A? How hard are you willing to work? And for some of you, that's harder than others. For some chapters, it might be a lot harder than other chapters. Avoid shortcuts. You know, once you start seeing how a problem works, you're going to start thinking, oh, I know this, I know this, I know this, I'm just going to shortcut, and I can work that problem in this much space and time instead of that much space and time. Well, when you're doing that, if you're not absolutely certain, if you don't know it frontward, backward, forward, well enough to teach someone else, then it's not time to take a shortcut yet. Why? Because you're not getting enough practice. You do one problem, you figure out how to work it, and then you start abbreviating, making shortcuts because you're doing the math or you're solving the problem in your head. When you look at that 2 or 3 or 4 weeks later, 2 months later, 3 months later, it's not going to be in your head anymore. So if you don't work the problem out the long way, using all the steps, then you're not practicing it the way you're going to need to solve that on the test. So once you know why it works, when you can use the formula or the method, how the problem works, you always remember, you're not forgetting things, you know what always works, you know what never to do, you know, I never use this formula for that situation, and you already know what to watch for. In other words, if you're ready to get up and teach that class how to do that, then it's probably okay to use shortcuts. But a lot of people start using shortcuts too soon when their brain hasn't fully learned how to work the problem. They just work one and got it right, and then they start shortcutting. Usually you don't have it in your memory well enough yet. So which ones are difficult? Anything you're studying in chemistry that's difficult, ask yourself, how am I going to remember how to work it? I got it right this time, but you need to think, okay, how am I going to remember that on the test? One thing you can do is when you're doing your homework, when you're solving the problems, and of course this works if you're doing homework on paper, it might be hard to do this online, solve the problem in your notebook and use subheadings or in the margin put notes. You know, save a big part of the margin so you can make notes to yourself. Include the units, or don't forget units, or remember to convert units back to what the problem asks for. Whatever tips, you know, when you're doing your homework, think, okay, that's not the right answer. And maybe you work on it for a while and you figure out what the right answer is. You need to make a note for yourself right then and there. Remember to blank. Or you have to solve it this way because of this. Anytime you get something wrong, that should be a red flag. Because if you get it wrong in the homework, you're probably also going to get it wrong when? On the test. So you need to make a note for yourself. Remember, convert back to the units in the question. Or don't forget significant figures, or whatever it was that messed you up. Now be aware that sometimes the answer in the book back of the book really is wrong. Okay. But write notes for yourself on what you messed up on. Put a big star by it, especially if you catch yourself doing the same thing wrong more than once. Like maybe you keep forgetting how to do significant figures. Highlight that, put a big star by it, because you've got to review that before the test. Whatever the key steps were, make notes, and like I said, especially after you see yourself making a mistake. How are you going to avoid making that mistake in the future? One that was hard to figure out would be one to put a star by so that when you come back to it a week later, if you're going to review next week what you learned this week, all those that had stars, work those problems again. Preferably without using your notes, but try to work it again. See if your brain remembers not to make those same mistakes again. Because if you make the same mistakes again, you're probably going to make them again on the exam. So you need to get to the point, you need to work enough problems so that you can work them on your own with no notes, no text, no solution guide, not having the answers in the back. If you can't do that, then you're not ready for the exam, because I don't think you get excuse interviews on the exam, right? So you've got to be able to work the problems without those things. So that's when you know you've done enough. Write an explanation for each step. I'm kind of saying the same things over and over. As if you're writing a textbook lesson. You know how in the textbook, when it teaches you a new problem, it works it and it tells you why you do each step? That's what you need to have in your notes. Okay, for each different type of problem. Not every problem, but every type of problem. Say it out loud as if you're creating a tutorial. You might think this is dorky, but a lot of people, if they will talk out loud while they're doing it, their brain will remember it. Okay? Note everything you have to decide, like which formula, how you have to go about balancing the equation, or whatever it is. Is it going to be a covalent bond or polar bond? Whatever it is you have to think about. Make notes about that. And again, pretend you're preparing your study guide for the whole class, even though you're really not. Because you need that study guide later to help you review. A lot of people make the mistake of, when they're getting ready for the test, they look back over their homework and they think, yeah, I remember how to do that problem, that makes sense, what are they not doing? What's wrong with that? You look over your problems, you think, I remember that, okay, that makes sense, okay, I remember I messed up on that. What part did that person leave out in their study? They're not doing the problems again, okay? If you just look at it and think, yeah, I remember that, well, when you get to the test, you don't have that to look at. All you have are the problems. So you've got to rework problems, not all of them, but every major time, okay? If you don't work those problems again, if all you do is look at them, then you're probably not really going to be ready. If you are, congratulations, but a lot of people are not. If you're doing that and you're making all A's, that's great. But if you're not, then think about doing it this way. So when you look at a problem in the book, think about, ask yourself why. Why did they multiply by 2? Why did they choose a coefficient of 2 or whatever? All these values, where did they come from? Where did they get this number? Why did they multiply this by that? What do the parts of the formula mean? You need to know what every part is and what it means. What should you know before starting the problem? So before you ever even start solving it, what do you need to know? What do you need to think about? What do you need to ask yourself? And can you guess the magnitude of the answer before starting? In some way, you need to be able to estimate. You think you're going to come out with a positive number or a negative number, a scientific notation number or a decimal. Okay? You need to kind of have some idea in your mind of what the answer might look like, so that when you finish all your calculations and you get the right answer, you need to go, no, that's wrong. I mean, that's way off wrong. Okay? If you don't know that, then you're probably going to struggle on the test. You ought to be able to predict something about that answer, so that if you get it way off, you'll know it. And that'll help you if you have a multiple choice test, and maybe your answer is close to one of those. Maybe you can think, well, that answer might be right, but you can take some of those multiple choice answers and think, no, it's not bad. There's no way that problem could come out with that answer. That way you can narrow down your choices if you are stuck on one. So, I almost said let's do a sample problem. We're not going to do it, but I want to show you one. It doesn't matter if this is way harder than what you would do. But the idea is think about each step, write a note about everything that's being done, and if you can't write a note, like if you knew what to do but you can't explain it, then you probably need more practice or more study. Okay? So let's just say that this were the problem right here. Okay? Now, it's telling you how much of it, it's a little complicated, but you might have a formula and it says, given this reaction, how much of each product is produced? Okay? So let's look at a way that you could solve that and what it would look like when you were finished. Okay? Doesn't matter if you understand this, but look what happened. And can you read that from the back part? Okay. What happens is, this is not what the problem was. What the person did first, if you leave out this dark blue, this is what your homework might look like. What I want your homework to look like is this. Not on every problem, but on every type of problem. Okay? You might notice that the first thing they did was balance the equation. So in your notes, put balance the equation. Otherwise, when you're studying for a test and you're kind of in a hurry, you might not realize, you might overlook the fact that that's not what the problem was. That's a balanced equation. Okay? So determine how much silicon dioxide remains. Did I get that right? I think that's what that is. So for every step of the problem, regardless of what it is, even if all it is balancing an equation, for every step of balancing, why did you do that step? Okay, I'm not going to go through all of it. I just want you to see the picture. Solving the problem would have a tip for every step explaining what it is, like what you see in the textbook when it first shows you how to do it, right? They explain each step. That's what your study guide would look like. It has instructions and tips for each one. Okay? So if you have to convert grams to moles at the end, put a reminder note for yourself for how to do that. Instead of just writing invert grams to moles, use molar mass to remind yourself what it was you did. Okay? So that's what a homework problem or a study guide problem would look like. So you need to plan plenty of time to do this. You might have figured out by now this is going to take a lot of time. So you have to plan time to study. You need to know when all your tests are and all your assignments. Put all your due dates in one calendar, paper, your phone, computer, whatever, so that you can look at your weekly schedule and start preparing for exams way ahead of time. Be sure and schedule around family. If you know your brother or sister's going to be in a big wedding and that's going to take a 3-day weekend, then you've got to study in front of that and after that. Realize that weekend is not going to be a study weekend and build in extra study time before and after it. And build in buffers, okay? That means what you do is plan a little bit more study time than you actually need, okay? So let's just say that you think you can get by on studying chemistry 1 hour a day. You might want to plan to study it an hour and a half a day. And if you get it all done, you've done all this, you're confident you can make an A, then change it and do something else. But if you know that you've got to have an hour a day, and all you plan for is an hour a day, then what's going to happen when something unexpected comes up? Okay? That's called planned happenstance. Plan a little more than you need so that if something comes up, you'll still be okay. So how to prepare for exams? First of all, read ahead. And when you're studying something new and they show you a problem in the book, go ahead and work it on your own paper, following what the book says. You know, sometimes you'll read something and then they'll say, okay, here are a couple of sample problems. And you think, I got that, I'm not going to work that. I encourage you to work those sample problems as you're learning the material rather than waiting all the way to the end of the chapter to work the problems. Identify what's memory. Some things you just have to memorize, okay, like the formulas for polyatomic ions, for example. You just have to memorize that and practice it versus a concept. What is a mole? What is a polar versus a covalent bond? What are the different shapes of molecules? Some things you need to know the concept, some things you just have to memorize. Some formulas you just have to memorize. Okay? Pay attention to the relationships. How does a mole relate to a quantity, okay, or whatever it is you're studying? Know how one thing relates to another, and work as many problems as you can, not just once, but try to work them again, or some of them, again, a week later, and a week later, and a week later, or whatever you need to do to be confident. So plan your study time according to mastery. If there's something that you are confident of, that you know really well, you get it right every time, don't spend as much time on that. And that's true when you're in the exam too. We'll come to that in a minute. But spend a lot of study time on things you don't feel confident about. That may be obvious, but some people don't think about that. So you've got to determine early which is which. When you're studying and you covered something in class that was very difficult, it was confusing at first, maybe you had to go see the tutor to figure it out, but now you've got it, that would be something to put a lot of stars by in your notebook so that you know that you understand it, but it took you a long time. You might need to review over that quite a bit before the exam. But something that you picked up immediately, maybe because you knew it from high school, you might not need to spend as much time. If you don't ever think about that, when you get ready to study for your exam, you'll still have to start at that point, okay, what do I need to work on, what do I not? If you mark things as you go, then you know what to spend time on. Spend time with experts. Tutor here at the University Academic Success Center down the hall, free tutoring. A private paid tutor if the free tutors don't fit your schedule. A study group. The SI leader, your instructor. Definitely a study group. Spend time with experts who can help you and are here to help you. Okay? Not the night before the test, but way before that. For things that are really difficult, look for notes and text coverage. Look back over your notes that you took. Read back over the text on it. You know, I suggest that you read the textbook before class, then read it again after class. It might make more sense after you've been to the lecture. If there's something you don't understand, look for that word in the index or the glossary, or words that are similar to it, like mole and molarity and molar mass. Know the difference between those. Adjust your notes if needed. If your notes weren't clear, get with your study group and see what their notes say. Maybe they understood it better or got it better. And that can help you take better notes. If you look at your notes immediately after class, that's the best time to review them. Because it may still be fresh in your mind that you can make corrections and fill in anything that you missed. As you're working problems, when you're working problems and you figure something out, add that to your notes. And get help from other people, but come prepared. In other words, you can't get as much help from your group members if you're not putting in the effort. They're helping you with basic stuff, so you don't get help with the more complicated stuff. So the more you prepare on your own, the more other people can help you, whether it's the tutor, the teacher, SI leader, or whatever, or your group. And I mentioned this in the beginning. When you're studying your textbook, study a certain topic. Don't try to cover the entire chapter in one sitting. Okay? Take part of the chapter, a certain topic, and master that. Then take a break. Then move to the next topic. There's no need to try to cover an entire chapter in one sitting. You probably won't remember it very well. And when you come to a topic like a cation, don't just say, okay, that's a positively charged ion, and move on. Why is it positively charged? How did it get positively charged? How does this relate to the structure of that ion? Okay? What happened to the particles? Did it lose a proton, gain a proton, lose an electron? More likely. Figure out how it got that way. Think about it. Think through it. Don't just say, okay, word definition, word definition, word definition. Like it might work in high school. You need to know it much more deeply than that. What about when you just need help, you cannot figure it out? Okay, there's a way not to do it and a way to do it. I don't suggest that you go to the teacher or even the tutor and say, can you do number 55 for me? Because first of all, if they do it for you, you're not learning really how to do it, okay? Because they're not going to be there to do it for you on the test. But the other thing to do is to work on it yourself as much as possible and let them know that you did that. You could say, I see that problem 55 is about the mole, I know that, but when I start the problem, I'm not sure which molar mass to use. Can you help me decide that? That way they can help the specific thing that you need rather than trying to tell you from the beginning how to work it. And you probably already know something about it. Ask a specific question and let them know that you've worked on it, you understand part of it. Let them know exactly what it is you don't understand. Okay? Because you probably, if you don't understand anything about it, chances are that you didn't read the book or you haven't really worked on it, you gave up too easily or something like that. And the teacher's probably not going to work the problem for you. You know, you need to work it yourself. But try to figure out what you don't know about starting the problem. And you can get better help that way. So instead of saying, can you go over how to predict bond type? Just, you know, that's probably like a 30-minute question you're asking. I think I understand how to predict bond type by whether the elements are metals or non-metals, but can you tell me again what difference electronegativity makes? How to ask a specific question rather than expecting somebody to give you a whole list of what they covered in class in 30 minutes. Now, it's very different, though, if you are pretty familiar with the material and you're studying with your group. It's great to go to your group to help them study and say, okay, how do you predict bond type? And expect the other person in your group to give you a big discussion of it. You're trying to test their knowledge. You're not trying to get them to teach you. Does that make sense, the difference? When you're asking the question to understand, you want to try to be as specific as possible so the person doesn't think you're just trying to get them to do the work for you. But when you're trying to test someone's knowledge, ask big questions because they should be able to discuss how to predict bond type. and tell you about metals versus non-metals, and tell you what difference electronegativity makes, or whatever it was you were studying. Ask big questions then. When you kind of already know the answer, you're just testing their knowledge. And you would not want to ask the teacher, what did we cover in class last week? I was absent. Because it's your job to know what you covered in class last week. It's not their job. You have to find that out from the syllabus and your other students. But it might be okay to say, I know in class last week we covered polar molecules, and I've read the chapter and done the homework, but can you tell me again why water is polar and carbon dioxide is not? And you might even say, my student didn't understand that, meaning you weren't trying to find the answer yourself. But you and your study group are kind of stuck. So could you please cover that little point? Okay? Rather than just expecting the teacher to tell you what they did when you're absent, and that's your responsibility. Test taking. Only have 2 more slides. When you get to the test, one of the biggest problems people have is they get to it and they panic. And once you panic, then your brain's kind of no good for that. So glance over the exam, but when you start seeing questions you're not sure about or you don't know what to do, don't think, okay, I failed, let me just walk out now. Try not to panic. And if you know that you have test anxiety, or if it ever happens, you get to the test, your mind goes blank, you can do nothing. And you may have studied for hours or days, but if you get into the test and creep out, okay, your brain is not going to work well. So if you encounter that problem, you need to go to the counseling center and get them to give you tips for what to do when you feel test anxiety coming on. Because you can fail the class, you can do every study tip I mentioned in here and more. But if you're the type of person that has test anxiety, that can get in your way no matter how much studying you do. But the counseling center can help you figure out how to manage that. But read through the questions, and this is just going to take a few seconds. You don't have to spend a lot of time on this. But when you get your exam, look through the questions and plan how to spend your time so you can answer as many questions as possible and get them correct. What you're trying to avoid is spending 10 minutes of your test time on a problem that you're not sure how to do, so you may get it wrong. You need to get as many points as you can, as quickly as you can, on the things that you're confident about. Now, the difficulty is, you skip a question because it's too hard, but you don't skip that number on the answer sheet. Don't do that. Okay? That's one thing that panic can do for you. So think, okay, I know how to do this one, put a check mark or a happy face or whatever. Those are the things I'm going to do quickly. I know how to do those. I feel confident about those. I want those points. I don't want to run out of time and miss 3 questions that I could have gotten right. So do the confident things first. Then go back and spend time on the things that you're not sure about that you might get wrong anyway. Last slide. On the things, when you do have a question that's just a fact, like what is a cation or what is the formula for a polyatomic ion, those are things that when you second guess, you're more likely to get it wrong the second time. Simple facts. When you're working a big problem on a test, write down every answer. Sometimes someone will start their calculations, they'll calculate the first step, and they'll get it, and they'll forget to write it down. Then they'll start calculating the next step, and they've forgotten what the answer was to the first step of the problem, and they have to go back and start over. And it's a timed test. So when you work a part of the problem, like you're trying to balance the equation and you think you've got it, write it down, then keep working. Write down an answer of every step. It just takes, a second to write something down. And include the units. When people are in the test and they're in a hurry, sometimes they forget when they're going through the problem what units they were in. Then at the end, they don't know if they are, if they remember to put it back in grams or if they didn't, because they didn't write down any units while they were working. Sometimes taking too many shortcuts can cause that. Okay? So that's why you have to know the material so well. You have to be able to do the problem quickly, but still put enough steps in, put enough units in that you don't get it done and think, oh no. Well, I haven't written down any units, so now I don't know if I've got the right answer or not. And that's where, the answer, one of the wrong answers on the test is probably not converting the units back to what the question asked for, because that's critical. You know, if you're trying to calculate the dose of someone's medicine, units are really critical. So there are sometimes in life when that really matters. Okay. What comments do you guys have to add?
Well, going along with the unit thing, but in the lower level chemistry, units actually help you solve a lot of problems. If you forget how to solve it, just use unit cancellation and you can get the answer for most of it. That's just a hint. The other thing is, some people may be just like, I don't know what to study and whatever, but most science, math courses will have like practice exams from the professors. If not, you will have SI that will have practice exams, or you can meet like upperclassmen and they will more or less give you a copy of the practice or well, their actual exam. And that highlights what materials you have to cover a lot.
And so, if you're taking chemistry 100, you might not know what SI is, but if you're in 105 or 115 or 117, a lot of students say that SI helps by a whole letter grade. And of course, it doesn't give you any literal points, but you're getting review from a student who's been through the class before or classes like it. So they can reteach some of the material, make a sample exam for you, and things like that. And so you can take that sample exam, hopefully study for the mock exam as if it's the real thing. Try to do it in the same amount of time you have for the real test. No notes, no books. That way you know what you know and you don't know, and then you can focus the rest of your study, because you've already been studying for weeks. You can focus the rest of your studying on what you got wrong. Yeah.
I definitely encourage you to attend that on take advantage of all available help opportunities from the office hours. Make sure you participate actively in recitation. That's an opportunity for group work, which is a totally different kind of studying. So as Mr. Brown said, teaching others is a really important opportunity to synthesize the information, speak it, that forces your brain to learn it in a totally different way. Make sure you do the online homework as well, which is a good practice opportunity. Take advantage of the textbook. That may seem really obvious, but I noticed in my class, some people just don't. So use the textbook. As Mr. Grimes explained, don't just use it passively. Use it actively, engage with it, do lots of practice, write out your strategies, be aware of your strategies, break it down, create your study guides, as he was explaining. I really like that explanation. Create a study guide as if you were creating it for someone who was excellent. I think that's a really interesting way to think about it. But make sure you're using advantage of the textbook, not just the lecture notes and the online homework, which we have. But there's a lot of information in the textbook that we can't cover all of it in class, so do take advantage of it, not just ignore it. And start early. Start early in the semester. If you're going to make changes to your studying habits, start now, which you are doing, and start, thinking about your strategies and putting in the time. From right now, don't just leave it until the end of the semester and close to finals time, because as has been explained, chemistry is a cumulative type of subject. Your knowledge can build on what you learn early in the semester, and what we do later on in the semester and in subsequent courses is going to take advantage of what we learn starting right now. So it's important to keep up with all the material starting from now. And I also really like the idea of breaking up your study into small parts. You don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to do marathon studying sessions of hours at a time. It's perfectly fine to do it in 2 minutes at a time, do some every day. Some people suggest you should do 2 to 3 hours of studying for every hour in the lecture. So we have classes that are 3 hours a week. That is about an hour a day. But you can break that up however you want to. If you need somebody for a class, so that you are prepared when you come to class, you're prepared to build on that information, that's a really good idea. Or if you prefer to do it in the evening, because that fits better with your schedule or your bodily rhythms or whatever, that's fine too. Just make sure you get regular studying and because that's a lot better than trying to load it up all on the weekend or all, the week before the exam or whatever. So I think that presentation is really comprehensive and fantastic way to sort of not really adding anything, just trying to emphasize two of the main points that I think work really well.
Some people use index cards and note cards for certain things, like formulas, tips on vocabulary words. That's by no means complete, but when you are stuck in line at Walmart, because they only have 2 registers open for 30 customers, instead of being upset, you can say, oh, good, and, study your chemistry, pull those note cards out, whenever you have downtime and you're just stuck somewhere, be very careful doing it in traffic jams, because you could have a fender bender. But, if you have got your foot on the brake, you can look at your cards or whatever. Don't do it while you're driving. When the car's meeting, put it down. That's hard, put it down. If you take a foreign language, how do you get good at a foreign language? You practice, you have to speak it. So when you're taking a foreign language, you need to get with other people in that class and practice speaking that language. When you say, hi, how are you? What did you do this weekend? How are the kids? How's life? Whatever you're talking about, talk about it in that language. And you need to be doing that, like she said, with the chemistry. You need to be talking to other people in your study group frequently, before class. Talk about it going into class, talk about it going out of class. The more you talk about it and use those terms and discuss it, the more you'll know it. So what questions do you have for Dr. Johnson and Bright? Hi, come in. Okay. Yeah, just put your email down here.
Well, one last thing I wanted to mention is I think it helps to take notes in class on paper versus on your computer.
That's true. Yeah, definitely recommend taking notes on paper, and then if you want to have it in your computer, organize it later. If you take notes using a laptop, studies have shown that people don't remember it as well. Okay? And I might as well say that you need to sleep 7 to 8 hours a night. If you don't get enough sleep, people in my class will get tired of hearing this, what they'll do. If you don't get enough sleep, it's like if you try to run your car on fumes. Okay? Your brain, if you think of your brain as a pie chart, like a pizza, if you don't get enough sleep, that takes away some of the pieces. The brain doesn't function as well. If you're stressed a lot, that takes away some of those pie pieces. And eventually, you don't have many pieces to work with. You need all the pieces to understand chemistry. So stress will be a problem. Not getting enough sleep will be a problem. You need to fix those things, okay, as much as possible. Because if you're stressed and or if you don't get enough sleep, that's going to limit your ability to understand chemistry and do well on the exam.
And I'd like to add another thing about stress. Like, for me, I realized that whatever happens, that whether you fail or pass an exam, life still goes on and you're still living, so there's really no need to be so stressed out that you're just like bursting and breaking your head over a wall or something. Because by the time you take that exam, you're either ready or you're not ready. After you finish the exam, you're just continuing on with that class. So I would say don't be as stressed as you think it has to be.
That's a good point. I had to get to that point in organic chemistry when I took that. There were some tests in organic chemistry when I was halfway through it. I thought, well, this is all I know, and There's nothing I can do about it now, so I'm just going to do the best I can, no matter how bad that may be. Because some things in organic chemistry just clicked, and I got them right away, and I couldn't explain to you really how. And some things I didn't get. And sometimes chemistry is like that. But I wasn't smart enough to do study groups back then. We didn't have advisors back then. We won't talk about what year it was.
With study groups or just no study groups, even if you study with a friend, I mean, I don't know, over phone or anything, another way you can help each other is make as hard of a question as you can, and you just like have the other person work it out.
Yeah.
Because if they can't work it out, you have to explain it, so you still reinforce yourself.
Exactly. You need to be hard on each other in your study group. Or if it's just one person. I mean, a group of two is still good. The studying is good. And now you see other people you can have study groups with. Because if they're good enough to come here, they're a good person to make a study group with. Okay, what questions do you have? Nobody's asked a question yet. You have questions. I forgot to bring index cards so you could ask them anonymously. Because you have questions, you don't want everybody else to hear, but, you know, those people, even if you ask something, and that's one of the biggest problems, is people don't ask questions in class. Well, it might be a silly question, everybody else might know the answer, or what if I volunteer an answer and it's wrong? I bet you'll get it right on the test. I misspelled a word one time on an English paper. I've never misspelled that word again. It was discreet. I'm not going to tell you many years ago, but I remember what word I misspelled. So I'm usually good at spelling. I got it wrong. I got counted off a point for spelling. But you remember what you get wrong. So volunteer an answer in class. If it's wrong and you're embarrassed, that'll last a few minutes. If you get it wrong on the test, that's a permanent grade.
That is the thing. Like high school and middle school and all this stuff, like before college, they say like there's no such thing as stupid questions, and then yet when you ask a question, like everyone in teachers think you're stupid. But honestly, like once you get to the college level, you have so many classmates that I mean they have the same question as you, but no one asks that. And then you never ask that to the professor in class, and then you're outside of class and you ask your friends and they don't know something. You can't find it on the internet, and you're like trying to find time when the professor is in the office, and that's just really stressful trying to find that one answer. So it's better to just like give up the embarrassment moment than to just ask in class.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I should have brought prizes for questions. I didn't think about that either. Go ahead.
How do you make yourself solve your schedule?
Good question. How do you make yourself? You can set out a schedule. I'm going to do this. I'm going to study this. I'm going to spend this much time. How do you make yourself do it?
Like a set schedule or just any schedule?
Yeah, reading.
What?
Reading the textbook?
Yeah, reading your courses. Okay. Since those semesters started on YouTube, two of them, and
So how do you stick to a plan once you make it?
Well, that depends on who you are and what your preferences are. And that you have to find yourself. I mean, it may take a matter of days, weeks, months, or even years. For me, like, I finally found out, like, how I studied best after I took Dr. Cusick, who is infamous for her biology course. But, the way it happens with schedules for me is, like, I have, like, set schedules for classes, appointments, whatever, but, like, I also research in the lab, do a flexible job, so those are actually done when I find, like, free time, but I don't set it, like, I guess, as permanent time when I have to do that or something. As preferential, it's like, I want sleep or whatever, but if I can't, I'll do it at night or something. But at the same time, I feel like once from like maybe 8 in the morning to 5, it's more important to have like schoolwork, meetings, or just group studying or whatever for school, not like extracurricular. So a lot of my time is actually just blocked off or classes or whatever, but the rest of it is just like free and flexible. So even if I have like a meeting with a friend, if I have to meet a professor for this class, I'll be like, bye friend, and then I'll say like I'll just go to my professor. And most of the time they're either studying or eating or whatever, but just find the time when you study the best. Because you may study better in the morning, so you may want to just walk off the section and you're like, okay, I'll just try to study this time if I don't have anything else. For me, I actually like studying at night because most people don't talk in the library, so I just go at night, study, and then I just sleep. In the morning, I just like meet friends and do social stuff rather than just like be a book nerd. So it really matters on your schedule and what your preferences are.
Those are all great points, and to some extent it depends on how badly you want the good grade. You know, and you have to think about your career goal. Do you have to have chemistry for your career goal? Is this the right career goal for you? It could be that if you're having trouble motivating yourself to do chemistry, maybe you really don't want that career goal as badly as you thought. If you do, then you have to make tough decisions. Sometimes, like you said, you have to tell your friend, I'm really sorry, I've got to study this. And I believe, this may be a little preachy, that if it's a true friend, that they'll be okay with it. Maybe they'll be mad for a minute, but they'll be okay with it. You know, if the friend doesn't care enough about your success, or the boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, doesn't care enough about your success to support you when you need to study, at least most of the time, then you might need to question which is more important. Then sometimes you have to question which is more important, the job or the GPA. Am I doing this job because if I don't do this job, they'll keep me out of school so I don't pay my tuition? Or am I doing this job because I want to have new clothes, nice car, nice apartment? Nothing wrong with those things, but you might have to decide car, GPA. You know, free time, GPA. And it's hard. You know, we all procrastinate, or most of us procrastinate from time to time, me included. And you have to rush at the last minute and you think, this is taking, how could I not do this? So, any questions for Dr. Johnson?
Don't forget that reading a textbook for the first time is one of the more time-consuming forms of studying. So if that's what you're getting bogged down in, maybe switch to a different form of studying. So maybe skim the textbook for the important concepts. You might be getting bogged down in the little introductions, skim for the important words and definitions, skim for the concepts. Maybe you don't have to read every single word. So skim for the problem solving, the important concepts, do the practice problems, make sure you do that. Make sure you do the active engagement, working on your problem solving strategies, understanding the concepts. Try not to get bogged down in, you know, reading every single word of the textbook, highlighting, getting that all done. So make sure you do an efficient studying. And go over this presentation again and make sure you take away from it how to do really efficient studying.
So if you gave me your email address, I'll email you the PowerPoint. There are other seminars you can go to. You can get a schedule down the hall in the Academic Success Center. There are sessions about memory and concentration, efficient study from a textbook, and learning styles, all kinds of neat things you can go to. And hopefully they'll be taped as well, so if you can't go, hopefully you'll be able to watch the video. Thank you.
Thanks. Can I say a few things?
Yeah.
One thing is most classes in college, like you can do really well in class, like have a pretty high A, like just studying their lecture notes than what they go over in lecture. Because professors usually tend to like make a test based on what they cover in class, not what the book says, because usually the book has like this much stuff, the lecture covers this much, and they like you can't cover everything, so it's that much. So just know that lecture usually is the best way to go if you don't have time. And then the thing with time is that most people think that they don't have time to like have fun, study, or anything. But one of the people who were like the student life thing at the medical department. Like I went to her seminar and she asked me, because I have the exact same question, and then she was like, think back to like today and then like tell me what you did. And then I was like, half of the things I did I couldn't even remember, which means it's pretty like it's really not worth the time to actually do whatever you did. So you actually have time as you think back on you're thinking, well, I can't think about this and what I did, so probably it's not that important.
Mm-hmm. So if you want to ask Brian or Dr. Thompson any question, maybe they can stay for a minute, but thank you for coming today.
I'll be here until 5 because I have another thing.
Okay. So thank you to Brian and Dr. Thompson for your tips as well.